I think we'll go ahead and get started. We might be joined by some others. We should not be surprised that the gospel text, for example, from this morning, you can spend, I think, as you probably have already concluded many times, I've been wrong so many times that I'm losing track here. So I may be wrong about this as well, but I think we could spend months talking about the Sermon on the Mount or the Sermon on the Plain, right? And if you had to take, if you're stuck with what text do you want to sort of embrace, I don't particularly like this idea, but let's say you had to take something out of the biblical text and say, you know what, this is the text I want to go with, as a universal sort of guide for how this would be it. This would be it. And the bar is very, very high here. And why? It runs right smack into the challenges that we face. And that is this whole idea of loving. It's one thing to love people who are lovable, right? That by the way, is not, you can do that, right? Or even likable, like Alan, right? Well, okay, as I said a moment ago, I was wrong. But to love your enemy. Love your enemies. By the way, this is not a subjunctive. This does not begin by saying you ought to do that. Ought kills us. We ought to do a lot of things that we don't do. It's the death of us. I might have. Nor is it an indicative. This is a imperative. Do this. Love your enemies. There is no asterisk to it. There is no footnote to this. I love footnotes, by the way. It's a mine of information generally. But there's no footnote here. Love your enemies. Find a way of doing that. And then, of course, it ends with what practically every religious tradition, or even sort of quasi-religious tradition, has. And that is, of course, what? The text ends on what note? Right. The golden rule, right? The golden rule. And some variations of the golden rule is even more dramatic than this. There is one that says, if you want to know how the other feels, pinch yourself. Which, by the way, I'm not, we never pinch ourselves that hard, right? But we have variations of this, and it's dramatic. And as I'm listening to that text, I'm reminded again about our topic. Who is the stranger among us? Who is the stranger? Who is the outsider among us? Who is the person that is on the margin? And there is not a day that goes by these days anyway, and maybe it has been the way forever, but these days, because it is sort of in our face, these days you think about those folks, our neighbors, who are without the means of daily sustenance, including children. So what constitutes being on the outside? What constitutes being on the edge? What constitutes being the stranger? And so I hope we think, I know we do, but I hope that we continue to think about these matters, not in a kind of a narrow way, not in terms of, I have never met you, therefore you're the stranger, or you have just arrived here and therefore, you've come from the outside. No, sometimes it is the case that those, even within the circle in which we find ourselves, are still on the outside. It's one of the realities. And I think I shared this story or this experience with you a while back, where when I was teaching in the first year, and I spoke with the campus pastor at the college at the time, and which is Alan and my alma mater, and we talked about exploring the possibility of a Habitat for Humanity chapter, which we did. And as we began to speak with businesses in the area, one of the refrains that we heard, is that we do not have homeless people living in this place. It's true that we don't have homeless, and therefore, right, it seems redundant and sort of ill-conceived to be worried about establishing a chapter for Habitat for Humanity. After all, we don't have homeless folks. But it's a nice idea. Okay. As it turns out, of course, here is the problem. It's bad enough to be an outsider, to be a stranger, to be homeless, to be hungry, etc. And it's worse to be invisible. And therein lies one of the challenges that we have, because there is this feeling that if, by the way, in terms of our own lives, in terms of the orbit of our existence, right, we don't see the other. The fact that we don't see the other does not mean they don't exist. That's the challenge. And then we listen to this text, and we have to ask, I hope we do, and it's a challenge for me, I will confess, who is the enemy? Jesus presupposes that they're enemies. Jesus does not say, look in the index under enemies and you will find a list. Who are the enemies? And it cannot be just kind of some, a theoretical idea. Who are the enemies? And what is it that constitutes an enemy? And I will tell you, I struggle with this. Because if, in fact, I have a different worldview from another person, by definition, it doesn't mean that that person is my enemy. It doesn't. So think about who we characterize as the enemy. Who is it? How do we decide who is the enemy?
At war, it's obvious. At war, it's obvious who's the enemy.
At war, it's obvious who is the enemy.
The definition should be someone who means to harm you.
Someone who means to harm you.
Yes.
At war, it's the enemy.
Hitler is an enemy.
Hitler is the enemy. By the way, when all else fails, we go straight to Adolf. As I've been thinking about this, let's go with Adolf. By the way, because you can't go wrong there. I mean, you cannot go wrong with Hitler. And
It's theoretical, though, as far as war is concerned, because the countries are at war. But this kid that's across from you that you're shooting at and shooting back at you, you're really not necessarily enemies with them. They're being told what to do, I'm being told what to do, and we may be on the same page, have the same children, have the same a mother at home worried about us. So, you've got the governments at war. The people themselves don't want to be blowing each other up. They just doing, supporting their countries.
And from what we understand in this text, Jesus is not speaking about a corporate reality here. Right? It's about you and me. So let me give you this story. We'll get back to Ruth here. Ruth is not going anyplace. There's a biblical story about a character in the book of Judges, and it's a pretty violent story. By the way, the Old Testament is filled with this, right? It's replete with a lot of tough text. And our role is not to say, you know what, that's such a difficult text. I'm going to do what Jefferson did, right? I'm just going to sort of start redacting, you know. Could you imagine? We got a copy of the Gutenberg Bible. I've decided, you know what, this is just too big. And there's a lot of stuff I don't like. I'm just going to, the early editors didn't do a good job. I'm going to do a better job. I'm just going to cut out a whole bunch. But there's a story in the book of Judges where there's war. And there's a character by the name of Jael, okay. That rings a bell for anyone? Okay? Okay. A couple of us. It's not the story we teach in Sunday school. And if, Cheryl, you do this in Sunday school, we need to have a conversation. Okay? And as this commander is running, right, and it's he takes refuge in this woman's house. And he says, I have nothing against you, you have nothing against me, can you protect me? Essentially, I'm paraphrasing. And she says, sure. And he says, can I have a place, I'm on the run, can I have a place to rest? And she says, sure. And he said, can I have a drink of water? And she says, sure, I'll do one better. I'll give you a glass of milk. Right? I mean, and he drinks and he rests, and while he is lying down, we have this horrific moment where she takes a tent peg, that's what the text says, and absolutely drills it into his temple. And what I love about the way the text is written, there is a pause, and then it says, and he died. Okay. I'm glad you clarified that for me. And in that whole story, by the way, this is the text we'll deal with maybe in the spring, you know, because springtime, you know, what do we want, right? We want 10 pegs into people's temples. But as war was going on, that war and other wars, one of the things that we have in the Bible and in this much longer text is the idea that while one group is celebrating, we have this very, very poignant moment of a mother who is standing at her door waiting for her son to come back from the war. And by the way, the son is not coming back. He's been killed. But the mother is waiting for her son to return. And the son is the enemy. And yet, of course, the enemy has a mother who is awaiting for him to return. So for every enemy there is, maybe there is a mother, a sibling, a spouse, a son, a friend who is waiting for them. And again, I shared a story about this book called The Sunflower. Right? And we have this extraordinary moment in this book, based on a true story, set in the context of the Holocaust, where this young SS soldier, 21 years of age, but has already lived a life of just extraordinary violence against the Jews. But now he is gravely wounded and is lying in the infirmary. and likely is about to die, and he says to one of the medical person, I would like to speak to a Jew, any Jew, because this becomes a moment of confession. I want essentially to say, to seek forgiveness. It's a very complex idea. Can I forgive you as an individual about something that you have done to me? And the answer is yes, I can. But can I forgive you about something that you have done to a whole group of people on their behalf? And the answer, in my view, is no. Can I really forgive you on behalf of a whole nation? It might sound good on paper. And Simon listens to this young man whose name is Carl tell him what he had done. And he waits for Simon to say, you're forgiven. But Simon never does. He just listens to Carl, who tells him about horrific moments, including a house filled with over 200 Jewish people, chained, and then burns it down. And he says ultimately to Simon, promise me, I would like you to promise me that you will take my belongings to my mother if you're able to after the war. Simon says, okay. And when he goes with his bag of Carl's belongings and delivers it to Carl's mother, Carl's mother says to him, Carl is such a good boy. Carl was such a good boy. So for every enemy, there is perhaps this mother who totally maybe misguided, but nonetheless is a mother. Love your enemies. It does not say, by the way, just wipe away everything that they have done. I don't know of any text that says that. And which means that love is a bar that is very complex and difficult. And this is what the mandate to us is. So as we continue, Ruth, by the way, Simon never tells the mother. Simon never tells the mother, well, excuse me, ma'am, your son Carl was a terrible Nazi. No. He listened, and he thought at that moment that not every moment to tell the truth has redemptive value. And he just walks away and leaves the mother with both her image of this good son coupled with grief. So Ruth is in the field as an outsider. And to a degree, even Naomi is a bit of an outsider, because she's coming back after all of these years to a place where she doesn't have a husband, or frankly, even a home. And she is accompanied by a young widow. And it begins again where she is welcomed by Boaz, who says to her, you should stay here among my women in the field. And she says, may I continue to find favor in your sight, my Lord, lowercase Lord. The Hebrew there, Adonai, could be translated sir, sometimes it is. For you have comforted me, and we know, we don't want to overly dwell in this, but we know the root of comfort has to do with what? To bring strength where there is weakness. Right? That's, you know, and I know, we do not run around comforting people who, you know, all is well. We comfort those who are broken in some place, and all of us are. And you have spoken, here's the thing, and you have comforted me, and you have spoken kindly to me, even though I am not one of your servants. You have embraced me as an outsider. And it's not theoretical. In embracing me as an outsider, you have provided for me sustenance, food for myself and for my mother-in-law, Naomi. And you have been kind to us. This is what, by the way, this is what we're asking. To bring comfort, to show compassion, to exemplify care, to be kind. And in my view, these should not be insurmountable bars, but they have become so in our society. And these texts cannot be texts that are kind of quaint, well, that's really special in those days. No, these are texts for us today. At mealtime, Boaz said to her, "Come here and eat some of this bread and have some wine." And here's the thing. If we, all of us, want to bridge between who we are and where we are with others, one way to do that is how? Eat together, a shared meal. A shared meal. And a shared meal has the potential to open our eyes and see in a way that we have never seen before. So I'll put you to the test. Where do we have an instance of that in the Bible?
Last Supper.
After Easter, on the road to Emmaus. Jesus is walking with the two guys who are heartbroken and they are deep in grief. We have lost our friend, and they do not recognize Jesus, who is walking with them. And when it is that they recognize Jesus for who he was, he breaks bread. And there's a recognition at that moment. Breaking of bread might not resolve every single moment of grief, but breaking of bread with another has the potential to open our eyes. Veer and I saw this movie that there is a not an easy movie to see, foreign film, and it was about caste. It was about, the whole thing was about caste and what caste does by way of a human thing. Make no mistake about this. The divisions that we have invariably are ones that we create. We decide who is the enemy, don't we? We decide who is the outsider. We decide who is the stranger. And in there, they are about, these two men are about to have, literally, to have tea together. And are about to drink tea together. Which, okay, a variation of breaking bread. and I say to you, so where you're from, and you tell me, and the place you're from immediately rings a bell for me, that's the place where a lower caste lives, and therefore I cannot ever break bread with you. And you take that cup of tea and you set it aside. This is what we do. And this is exactly what we must not do. And Boaz says, come and break bread. And Boaz says, do not reproach her. Do not set her to the side. Do not tell her that she cannot do this. She has to be included. And by the way, at this point, this is no quid pro quo. We do the decent and right and honorable and virtuous thing. Why? For its own sake. Not for what I will get out of it. Not what I hope will be given to me in return. Just, in fact, not only allow her to glean, take some of what has already been harvested and take out a bundle and give it to her. It's a remarkable thing. It is a truly remarkable thing of openness. And then we get to this, in case you've ever wondered if they are both funny, but sometimes very kind of wink-wink moments in the Bible. There are many. With innuendos. And you remember very early on, some very funny stuff. We talked about one last week. Remember the healing, or 2 weeks ago, Jesus healing the blind man, right? Yeah. And saying, oh, I need a redo here. Okay. And you remember Sarah, right? Standing behind the door, hearing that the Lord is saying that you're going to have, a baby. And she laughs. And she laughs maybe with some justification, what, at my age? And God saying to her, why are you laughing? And she says, I'm not laughing. What a great moment. And God says, yes, you are. You're laughing. And Sarah says, I wasn't laughing. And by the way, nothing comes out of this is not, So you have this wonderful thing. And then we get to this. And Ruth comes back and she's reporting to Naomi, her mother-in-law. And then Naomi said to her daughter-in-law, as she's reporting, Naomi says, blessed be he by the Lord whose kindness has not forsaken the living or the dead. Naomi said to her, the man is a relative of ours, one of our nearest kin. By the way, all of a sudden we're discovering new information here. Up to this point, we did not realize that Boaz was a relative. So new information. And he is what? He is one of our nearest kin. Keep that in mind. And then Ruth the Moabite said, he even said to me, stay close by my young men until they have finished all the harvest. And even this is a little, by the way, think about this. This is a little bit of a change in the landscape. Remember one chapter before that? What did Boaz say to the young men? Behave yourself. Don't start hitting on Ruth, to use modern language. Leave her alone. Now, as she becomes more and more part of the community, the men are being her protectors. stay close. Remember that word? Exact same Hebrew word. It's pronounced dabach. It's the Hebrew word that earlier we were told that what? Ruth clung to Naomi. It's the same word. And by the way, here is the thing. Ruth is clinging to Naomi not because Naomi has any great strength. This is the whole point. That Ruth stays close to the person who arguably is the weakest and maybe most powerless, excuse me, in her presence. If there is a time to stay close, if there's a time to cling, to give strength to the other, it's in moments of weakness. That's when it matters. I know it's easy to stay close to those in power. Evidently, some people believe that as a virtue. And those who have strength, and those who have plenty. And here it says, Ruth clung to the weakest person in her presence. She stayed close to bring strength to that. Naomi said to Ruth, her daughter-in-law, "It is better, my daughter, that you go out with his young women, otherwise someone might bother you in another field." So she stayed close. That's the same word again. To the young women of Boaz, and she gleaned until the end of the barley and wheat harvest, and she lived with her mother-in-law. And then we get to this wonderful section. And so Matt and I were speaking a little while ago. There are folks, not us in this room because we're enlightened, but there are folks who, as we heard this morning, who would just as soon redact inconvenient parts of the Bible that we don't want to deal with. By the way, this morning text from Luke is an inconvenient text. Love your enemies, the rich and the full. And there are folks who don't want to deal with that. And then there are other texts that we would just as soon not deal with because, it sort of gets too close for comfort or makes us uncomfortable. And so the Song of Solomon, you know that song? That book? It's very sensual, isn't it? If you've read it. Beautiful. And you will hear it sometimes in weddings for those folks who are unafraid to use it. And yet, I remember, and I have this book, there is a theologian who said, no, it has nothing to do with that kind of love. It's all a metaphor for politics. And I'm thinking, which version are you reading? Because you don't want to believe that the text could actually be talking about something like this. But it does. Or we went to a wedding, I'm sorry, but we went to a wedding a week ago. And the minister in this wedding used, or something I said? No. Okay. All right. Because every time we talk about these things and someone leaves, either there is lightning or someone leaves the room. And
I wanted to look up Solomon.
well, he went to read the text. And it started on a good note because the minister said, Jesus went to the wedding at Cana. It's true. And it's the first miracle story in the Bible that Jesus, right? And then it just went downhill from there. Because the family, which is entirely fine, did not believe that any kind of wine should be served at this wedding reception. So what do you do when you begin to speak about Jesus turning water into wine at a wedding feast, when you're at a wedding that says there is no wine? Well, what you do is to say, I want all of the spirit of the water of your spirit to be turned into wine. And I'm thinking, there is no water of your spirit here. Jesus turned 170 gallons of water into wine. It was a celebration. Don't twist yourself into pretzels because you don't want to deal with the difficult text, which is what's happening. So then we have this wonderful moment here. I'll just read it very quickly. I know we're running out of time. So Naomi, her mother-in-law, said to her, my daughter, I need some security. And I love this, because so far, so much of what they have been doing is risky. And so we have this tension between risk and security. And risk, here's the thing. If you, as you were growing up, had the opportunity, maybe the privilege, the joy of climbing trees. I don't know if you did. I did. Much to my mother's chagrin. But I did. Because mothers are afraid that, right, going to fall. If you're climbing on a big tree, the safest place for you to sit and be is perhaps on a major trunk, maybe in the elbow of a trunk, and a branch, and it's safe. But here is the deal: if you want fruits, you have a choice. You need to go off on a limb. I can't tell you how far you should go, but that's where you're going to find it. So you have the tension between risk and reward, or security, both of which are important. But if you decide that you're going to hang on to the trunk forever and never move out, you will not find the fruits. So they have taken some risk up to this point. And now Naomi says, I need for you to be secure. And I want to just quickly read this because it is so wonderful. So that it might be well with you, by the way. It might be well with you. Now here's our kinsman Boaz, whose young women you've been working with. He is winnowing barley tonight at the threshing floor. Go wash and anoint yourself. I want you to sort of picture this now. Okay, wash, anoint yourself, put on the best clothes and go down to the threshing floor. This is night. Do not make yourself known to the man until he is finished eating and drinking. Now, there are no sort of notes here as to what that even means, right? Just maybe be in the shadows a little bit. Let him be satisfied, eating and drinking. When he lies down, observe the place where he lies, then go and uncover his feet and lie down, and he will tell you what to do. I am telling you, if any of us in this room suggests this to our daughter, you need your head examined. You are not saying, go down to the threshing floor and uncover. By the way, the whole idea of uncovering his feet is a euphemism. Practically every scholar who is worth anything, not the ones who think that everything is political, but every scholar, right, would say, wink, wink, it's not his feet. And the uncovering of a skirt, in a way, in ancient times, is also a marriage proposal. We have tons going on here. And we have a mother-in-law that is a dream mother-in-law, all right, who is saying to her daughter-in-law, I have a plan. And this plan will cause everyone in about 3,000 years to blush when they hear it. But go down, and by the way, when he's finished eating and drinking, then make yourselves, quote, known to him. And don't worry, he will tell you what to do. And so now I'm sure you're all thinking, what happened after that? Which is where we'll pick it up next week, by the way. All right, thanks everyone. I know we went a little long, but thank you. Yeah, the cliffhanger.